So today we're going to take a look at the second section of integrated algebra. And today we're going to look at solving equations that have fractions in them and also take a look at a couple special cases. So the objectives here is always to get your variables to the same side of an equation. So you have the option of which direction you want to take them, but you definitely want to get your variables to one side of the equal sign, and then use your inverse operations or opposite operations to get that variable by itself. The steps are listed here for you. Distribute or kill the fractions is always your first step. We talked about killing the fractions in the first unit, but sometimes distributing may be easier and save you a little bit of time, especially if there's just one fraction in the problem. And then once you do that, you can take the variables to one side and then get the variables by itself. So taking a look here at number 1, we have 2/3 times 3m minus 6 equals 5 minus m. So the first step for these problems, I'm going to show you just kind of how to distribute. We're going to take the fraction that's on the outside and multiply it times these terms inside the parentheses. So when I take 2/3 times 3m, really we can just know that we're going to have our m variable. We take the fraction 2/3 and multiplies it times 3. So we talked about how you can do that by either making that whole number a fraction by putting a 1 there. So you could take 2 times 3 to give you 6, 3 times 1 to give you 3, 3 goes into 6 2 times, so that would end up being 2m. Or we'll talk about how you can plug that into your calculator as well. So you could also put a parentheses, type 2, the numerator, then the divide button, which will give you a little backslash like this, and then type your denominator 3 and then close your parentheses, and then you can just select your operation multiplication times the 3 there that's in front of the m, and that will also give you 2m. So either way works. Next we'll take the 2/3 times the -6, and when we do that, distributing again, that would end up being -12 up top, 3 on the bottom, so 3 goes into -12 4 times. So we have 2m minus 4 on the left side, and then the right side is going to remain the same. From here, now that we've distributed, now we can just solve it like our multi-step equations. We're going to get our variables to the same side. So I'm going to start by adding m to both sides. So really, if there's no coefficient there, we know it's a 1. So 2m plus 1m is going to give us 3m. So we have 3m minus 4. And on the right side, these cancel out, leaving us just with 5. Next, we're going to get that m term by itself by adding 4 to both sides. All right, we're always going to use our opposite operations. So opposite subtraction is addition. Cancels it out here, leaving us with 3m. 5 plus 4 is 9. And then the final step, here 3 and m are being multiplied, so we do the opposite operation to get m by itself. Dividing both sides by 3 ends up giving us a value of 3 as our solution for the variable m. Next problem, moving over here to number 2. We have 1/3 times 6u minus plus 3 equals 7 minus u. So once again, I'm going to start by distributing. So distributing here, like I said, you can either type parentheses 1 divided by 3 parentheses times 6 in your calculator, or you can write it out on your paper and multiply the fractions by putting that 6 over 1. We see that 6 over 3, which once again equals 2. So here we have 2u. I'm doing the same thing, 1/3 times 3 over 1 ends up being 3 over 3. 3 goes into 3 one time. So we have 2u plus 1 after we distribute. Right side hasn't changed. Next, we want to get our variables to the same side. I always choose to move the smaller of the two. That way I work with positive numbers. Cancels out over here on the right. On the left, 2u plus 1u is 3u. So we have 3u plus 1 equals 7. Subtract the 1 from both sides. 1's cancel out, giving us 3u equals 6. And then final step is to divide by whatever your coefficient is, in this case 3. So 6 divided by 3 is going to give us a value of 2. So we get that the value for u would be 2. Let's move down here to number 3. Here we have 2/3 times 9x minus 12 equals 8 plus 2x. So first step, distribute here. So this time, if we made those into fractions, we'd have 2 over 3 times 9 over 1. 2 times 9 is 18. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 goes into 18 6 times. So we have 6x. Next, taking 2/3 times -12. So 2 over 3 times -12 over 1. 2 times negative 12 is negative 24. 3 times 1 is 3. So we just divide that in our calculator. Negative 24 divided by 3 gives us a negative 8. So we get 6x minus 8 equals 8 plus 2x. Next step, get your x terms on the same side of the equation. So I'm going to do that by subtracting 2x from both sides. Cancels out over here on the right. On the left, 6x minus 2x is 4x. So we get 4x minus 8 equals 8. Now we want to get that x term by itself by adding 8 to both sides. 4x equals 16. And then the last step, we want to divide by our coefficient of 4 to get x by itself. So 16 divided by 4 ends up giving us 4 as our solution, number 3. Once again, you can always take that solution and plug it back in to check your answers and make sure that you've done it correctly. Let's take a look over here. Number 4. Looking at number 4, we have the 1/4 that we want to distribute here to the 16u plus 60. So if I take 1 over 4 and I multiply it times 16 over 1, I get 16 over 4. 4 goes into 16 4 times. I don't want to forget that u variable there. And then 1 over 4 times 60 over 1 equals 60 over 4. 4 goes into 60 15 times. So here we have 9u minus 5 equals 4u plus 15. I want to get our variable terms to the same side, so I'm going to subtract 4u to cancel it out over here on the right side. 9u minus 4u equals 5u. So we have 5u minus 5 equals 15. To get the 5u by itself, we're going to do opposite operations, add 5 to both sides, cancels it out over here on the left side. So we're left with 5u equals 20. And then we want to divide by 5 on both sides to get u is equal to 4. So let's move on to, here we're going to talk about a couple special cases. We have all real numbers and no solution. Could be 2 possible answers when you solve an equation. So all real numbers just means that any real number can be a solution to that equation. No solution would be that there are no solutions to the equation. And they've given you the symbol there, that all real number symbol. We're going to use just this R, and for the no solution, we're going to use the 0 with a strike through. So looking at these special cases, first one, taking this 7y plus 14 equals 7 parentheses y plus 2. We want to distribute that 7, so we get 7y plus 14 is equal to 7y plus 14. So right away you can kind of notice that these things are the same, but let's go ahead and try to get our variables to the same side. So to do that, I would subtract 7y from both sides. What we notice is that that is going to cancel out on both sides, leaving us with an equation that just says 14 is equal to 14. Once we get to that step and our variables have canceled out and we're left with just 2 values, if those values are indeed equal and you're left with that true statement, like in this case 14 equals 14, that would be a situation where you would say that your solution would be all real numbers. So if you're left with a true statement, once your variables cancel out, you would have an all real number solution. Let's take a look at number 2. Here we have negative 8x equals negative 8x plus 9. So once again, we want to try to get our variables to the same side. So since the 9's already over here, I'm going to add 8x to try to get the variables to the same side. Notice that it cancels out on both sides. So here really on the left side, all that we're left with is a 0. On the right side, we have a positive 9. This is where we're left with a statement where these values are not equal. So anytime you're left with a false statement, when your variables cancel out, you know that that is a no solution. So in this case, we'd say that there is no solution for x. That would make that equation true. Number 3, here we have some distributing we need to do first. So let's go ahead and distribute the 6 here. So 6 times n is 6n, 6 times negative 1 is negative 6. We still got the plus 3. On the other side, we have 2n minus 8, and then we need to distribute this 5. So 5 times 2n is a positive 10n. 5 times 1 is a positive 5. So now we have some like terms that we can combine. So on the left side, go back there. Left side, we have this negative 6 and a positive 3 that we can combine. On the right side, we have this negative 8, positive 5 we can combine, as well as two variable terms, positive 2n and a positive 10n. So looking at the left side, we have the 6n. When we combine negative 6 and positive 3, we're left with negative 3, and we add those two values together. On the right side, adding our variable values together, 2n and 10n give us 12n. Negative 8 and positive 5 end up combining to make a negative 3. So now we want to try to get our variables to the same side. I'm just always going to move the smaller one. So in this case, I'm going to subtract 6n from both sides. Cancels out on the left side. So I'm left with negative 3 is equal to 12n minus 6n is 6n minus 3. Then I want to get my 6n term by itself. So to do that, I'm going to add 3 to both sides of my equation. Once I add 3 to both sides, cancels out on both sides. So a lot of times people will automatically put no solution here, but you really want to make sure that you take a look. So really we have a 0 on the left side of our equation, and then we still have a 6n. So we still need to go ahead and divide by 6 here. Divide by the coefficient to get n by itself. And what we'll see is that you can actually take 0 and divide it by 6. So that is not a no solution. 0 divided by 6 ends up being 0. So here my solution for n would be the value 0. Taking a look at number 4. Once again, we have some distribution to do first. Some distributing to do first. So 4 plus 9 times 3 is 27x. 9 times negative 7 is a negative 63. Equals negative 42x minus 13. Distributing the 23 to the 3x. 23 times 3x is 69x. And 23 times negative 2 is negative 46. So once again, go back through and combine your like terms. So here we have a positive 4 and negative 63 that can be combined. And on the right side here we have a negative 13 and negative 46 that can be combined. And then our variable terms on the right side that can be combined is the negative 42 and the positive 69. So going back, 4 and negative 63 combine to make a negative 59. So we have 27x minus 59. On the right side, combining our x terms, negative 42x and a positive 69x combine to make a 27x. The negative 13 and negative 46 combine to make a negative 59. So now we want to get our variables to the same side, so I'm going to subtract 27x from both sides. When I do that, 27x's cancel out, so I'm left with negative 59 equals negative 59. And just remember, anytime you're left with a true statement, so where both values are actually indeed equal, that would be a case where you would have all real numbers as your solution. So let's take a look now, anytime that we have different denominators. So on that first page, we had just one denominator. Down here, we have different denominators. So I'm going to encourage you to go ahead and kill the fraction, and we'll talk about how to do that. So in order to kill the fraction, we're going to multiply everything by the value of the denominators when we multiply them together. So here on this number 1, we see that we have 1/12x plus 5 over 6 equals 3 over 4. So we're going to take all these numbers along the bottom here. So the 12, the 12, the 6, and the 4. So all the numbers along the bottom. And you want to multiply those numbers all together. So in your calculator, you're taking 12 times 6 times 4, seeing what that number comes up to be. In this case, it's a pretty large number, 288, which is fine. That is the number that you want to take, and we're going to multiply the entire equation by that value. So we're taking all the denominators, multiplying them together. take whatever answer you get and multiply that times the entire equation. So notice that. Now I'm going to have to distribute. So when I do that, I'm taking 288 times 1 over 12x. When I do that, I get 288 over 12. So 12 goes into 288, or 288 divided by 12 is going to give me 24x. Next, I'm going to distribute, take it 288 times 5 over 6. So you could just do 288 times 5 divided by 6 in your calculator. That would give you 240. And then 288 times 3 divided by 4 ends up giving you 216. So now we've got rid of all the fractions. We've essentially killed the fractions, and now we just have a multi-step equation, just like we're familiar with. So to get x by itself, next step is to subtract 240 from both sides. When I subtract 240 from both sides, I'm left with 24x is equal to 216 minus 240 gives me a negative 24. And then I always want to divide by the coefficient as my last step to get that variable by itself. So x is going to equal negative 24 divided by 24 ends up being a negative 1. Take a look at number 2 now. So looking at number 2. Once again, we're taking these numbers on the bottom of our fractions, multiplying them together to come up with the value that we're going to use to kill the fraction. So we're taking 8 times 2 times 4, seeing what that comes out to be. In this case, it's 64. So I want to multiply this entire equation by 64. So I'm going to take 64 times 1 over 8x to begin. So that's going to leave me with 8x. Multiply it times 1 over 2, which is going to leave me with 32. And multiply it times 1 over 4, which ends up being 16. Those are things that you can just kind of plug in your calculator. Or you can take 64 times 1 and then divide it by 4. Now to get x by itself, we're going to want to subtract 32 from both sides, which leaves us with 8x equals negative 16. And divide by 8 on both sides to get x is equal to negative 2. Good. Now you see here in problem number 3 that we have a problem where we have, so we want to go ahead and start by killing this fraction. So we want to take a look at the denominators here. We have a 5 and a 4. So when we take the 5 and the 4, multiply those together, we get 20. So we want to multiply this entire thing by 20. And when we do that, really we're just going to take the 20 and multiply it times the fractions out front. So since that 1/5 is being multiplied by n plus 3, really all we need to do is take the 20 times the fraction out front. So 20 times 1 is 20 divided by 5 ends up being 4. And we're just going to place that number outside the parentheses n plus 3. So we're not going to mess with anything inside the parentheses. We're just multiplying it times that fraction out front. So over on the other side, 20 times 1 over 4 gives us 20 over 4, which ends up being 5. And then we have the n plus 2. Now we just need to distribute. So we've got rid of all the fractions. So distributing here, we get 4n plus 12. On the other side, 5n plus 10. And then getting the variables to the same side. Here I'm going to subtract the smaller of the two. So I'm left with 12 is equal to 1n plus 10. And I need to subtract the 10 to get that n by itself. So when I do that, 12 minus 10 ends up being 2. So I get the value of n to be 2. Over here on number 4. Same thing, we want to kill the fraction. So we're taking the denominators 2 and 4, multiplying those together to give us 8. So we're going to multiply this entire thing by 8. So remember, we're just going to multiply that times the fractions out front. So 8 times 1 over 2 ends up giving us a 4. So we have 4 out front, and then in parentheses y minus 5. 8 times 1 over 4 ends up being 2. So we have the 2 out front. So now we've killed the fractions, and now we can just distribute and solve like normal. So 4y minus 20 after we distribute is equal to 2y minus 2. Now we want to get our variables to the same side, so I'm subtracting 2y, which takes me to 2y minus 20 is equal to negative 2. Add 20 to both sides. And I end up with 2y is equal to 18, divide by 2, y equals 9. So here we're solving with fractions with multiple values in the numerator. So once again, we want to kill the fractions to begin, so we always want to find the number that we're going to use to multiply and kill those fractions by taking the denominators, multiplying them together. So 2 times 4 is 8. So I'm going to multiply this whole thing by 8. When I do that, instead of taking a lot of extra time and distributing this 8 and multiplying it times 4q plus 3, really I'm just going to say that I was going to multiply that whole thing by 8. And now I can just see how many times does 2 go into 8. So how many times does this denominator go into 8? And 2 goes into 8 4 times, so that is the number that I'm going to put outside of my 4q plus 3. So I've multiplied it to that first term. Here I need to make sure I also multiply it times the 6. So 4 times 6 ends up being a 48. And then I'm going to take the 8 and multiply it here times 3q plus 5. So I'm going to put it outside the parentheses. And then notice that 4, my denominator in this case 4, goes into 8 2 times. So then I have 2 on the outside of my parentheses, and I'm going to leave 3q plus 5 by itself. So now I just need to distribute the 4 and the 2. So when I do that, 4 times 4q is 16q. 4 times 3 is 12. Plus 48 is equal to 2 times 3 is 6q. 2 times 5 is 10. Now we just need to combine some like terms. So we have 16q plus 50. Plus 60 is equal to 6q plus 10. Get your variable terms to the same side. So subtract 6q from both sides. Gives me 10q plus 60 is equal to 10. Subtract 60 from both sides. So move it over here to the left. So I have 10q is equal to negative 50. Divide by 10. Q is equal to negative 5. Same thing here. We have two different numbers in the denominator. So I want to take those numbers 6 and 3, multiply them together. Multiplying those together will give me 18. So I'm going to multiply this entire equation by 18. So when I do that, once again, multiplying it times this first one, we're just going to put this in parentheses and multiply it times 18. 6 goes into 18 3 times. So I'm going to throw a 3 outside the parentheses and then leave 3r plus 5 the same. Next is 18 times 1, which just gives us a positive 18. And then we want to multiply 18 to 4r plus 3. So here, put outside the parentheses, 3 goes into 18 6 times. So we have 6 outside of our parentheses, and then we leave the 4r plus 3 alone. Distributing now. So we've killed our fraction, so 3 times 3r is 9r, 3 times 5 is 15. Still got the plus 18, 6 times 4r is 24r, and 6 times 3 is 18. Next, you want to combine your like terms. So over here we have 9r plus 33 is equal to 24r plus 18. Get your variables to the same side. So I'm going to choose 9r to move. So subtracting 9r from both sides, I get 33 is equal to 15r plus 18. I want to get the 15r by itself, so I'm subtracting 18 from both sides. 33 minus 18 ends up being 15. So 15 equals 15r. And then last step is to divide by the coefficient. So we get r is equal to 1. So just have a couple more. Next one, our denominators are 2 and 4. So taking 2 times 4, we get 8. We want to multiply the entire equation by 8. So when we do that, right, we're multiplying numerator by 8. 2 goes into 8 4 times. So then I'm going to place a 4 outside the 2x plus 3. 8 times 1 ends up being 8. 8 times, in parentheses, 3x plus 2, so we're just taking the 8, dividing it by 4. So I end up with a 2 outside my parentheses on the right side. So distribute now, 4 times 2x is 8x, 4 times 3 is 12, plus 8 is equal, 2 times 3x is 6x, and 2 times 2 is 4. Combine your like terms after you distribute. So 8x plus 20 is equal to 6x plus 4. Now you want to get your variables to the same side. So I'm going to subtract 6x from both sides. 2x plus 20 is equal to 4. Subtract the 20 to get that 2x by itself. Move it over here. So we have 2x is equal to negative 16. Divide by 2. X is equal to negative 8. Last one here, we just have some decimals. .25x plus 0.05x plus 3 equals 2.85. And so here we're just going to distribute like normal. So taking the 0.05x, multiplying it times those two, so 0.25x plus, here this is just going to be 0.05x, 0.05 times 3 ends up giving us a 0.15. Equals 2.85. So now I just want to combine my like terms. So now I have our two different x terms that I'm going to combine. So 0.25x plus 0.05x ends up being 0.3x plus 0.15 equals 2.85. Then I'm going to subtract 0.15. When I do that, I'm left with just 0.3x is equal to 2.7, and divide by 0.3 on both sides to get x is equal to 9. So just remember, when you go to kill any fraction, especially when you have multiple fractions, you always want to take the denominators, multiply them together, and then use that value to multiply the entire equation by. That will get rid of any fractions for you, and then you can solve it just like you would a multi-step equation.